Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Knowledge Exchange series being presented by the Waterloo Wellington Older Adult Strategy, a special edition for this Seniors Month. My name is Don Wildfong. I am the implementation facilitator for the Waterloo Wellington Older Adult Strategy, and I'll be your host today. Just to let you know a little bit more about the Waterloo Wellington Older Adult Strategy, it was envisioned as a 10-year comprehensive plan to optimize the health of an aging population in Waterloo Wellington and to strengthen the health systems, services, and supports that they rely upon. So we're very interested in improving the lives of older adults, their families, their caregivers, and those who provide services to them. We're delighted to be hosting this second webinar in our series on compassion fatigue, in collaboration with the Canadian Mental Health Association in Waterloo, Wellington. Just a few housekeeping points before we move forward. Today's session is being recorded, and it's important that you know that we can't see you and we can't hear you. So our chance to engage with one another will be done through the Q&A forum. You'll find a Q&A section on your screen, and if you have any questions you'd like to offer us today, we'll do our best to make time to answer those at the end of this session. If we are unable to answer all of your questions, we're happy to take those forward and respond to you. And you'll have an opportunity when you participate in our evaluation survey to ask any further questions. And our presenter today, who we're delighted to welcome, is Laura McShane, Coordinator of the Mental Health Promotion and Education for the Canadian Mental Health Association, Waterloo, Wellington. We're also joined by Giselle Loyola, our technical expert. If you can back up the slides, just one, please. We're also joined by Giselle Loyola, our technical expert, who is available to take any questions that you might have or address any needs you might have, technical needs you might have. So today in this webinar, we're hoping that you will learn how to recognize the difference between stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue, how to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy coping strategies. And we're going to discuss the importance of increasing self-care to mitigate the impact of compassion fatigue. Following this webinar, you'll receive handouts and resources that will be provided in an email to you that will help to further your learning and help you to identify where and how to reach out for support. So at the end of the webinar, following this, we'll provide you with a copy of the slides you're seeing today, a recording of this video, a survey evaluation, and many materials in PDF format that have so graciously been provided by Laura McShane. So let's move directly into introducing our guest today. Laura McShane is a graduate of the University of Waterloo with a BA in Social Development Studies and a diploma in social work. She is also a certified life coach. Her work experience includes residential work with young offenders, counseling with youth and families, long-term community-based support to people living with mental health issues, and over 15 years experience delivering community and workplace trainings related to mental health and suicide awareness. She is currently the coordinator of the Mental Health Promotion and Education Services at Waterloo for Waterloo Region with the Canadian Mental Health Association of Waterloo, Wellington. So it's our distinct pleasure to welcome Laura to guide us through this workshop. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks very much, Don. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm really happy to be here today. So as Don mentioned, we're going to talk a bit about compassion fatigue. What exactly is that? How is it different from stress? It's actually quite similar to stress as well. And then we'll talk about some strategies to maintain wellness. You know, a lot of us are in caregiving roles, maybe with family members. We're living through a global pandemic, so there's the added stress of all of that. So there's a lot going on for us right now. And really important to remember that as caregivers, it's just as important to take care of ourselves as it is to take care of the other people that you're caring for in your life. So I will be presenting the information to you. If you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will get to those at the end. If you have any technical issues, you can also put those in the Q&A and our moderator, Giselle, will will give you a hand kind of resolving some of those issues. I will be taking myself off screen just for the content of the webinar, but we'll come back on the end for question and answer. Okay, so we're just going to get started, and really happy that you've joined us today. So when we talk about our mental health, it's really important to know what we're talking about. Having good mental health it's not just the absence of being diagnosed with a mental illness. Many things can affect our mental well-being and our mental health throughout the course of the day, whether that is caregiver or compassion fatigue, stress, feeling burnt out, or not taking enough time for yourself. Our mental health impacts so much of our life: how we think, how we feel, how we act, how we cope with challenges, how we make decisions, how we view the world around us, how we get along with the people in our lives, and ultimately how we feel about ourselves. So it's really important to continue to take care of our mental well-being. There's a lot of talk right now about our physical health and our physical well-being with COVID-19, and the importance of, wearing a mask and using hand sanitizer and washing your hands as often as you can. But it is also important during this time that we take care of our mental health as well. So that's kind of the part that we're going to be spending the next 45, 50 minutes or so talking about today. And as caregivers for perhaps an aging loved one, perhaps you are still in the workforce to some degree and are working in the field or volunteering in the field of caregiving. Um, Maybe you just have a friend that is isolated, and you're looking after them as well. You cannot care for people, be a part of whether it's their illness, loss, that kind of thing, and not be touched by it. You're giving of yourselves, your compassion, your empathy, because you care about people. And you can't do that without being impacted by that. Okay. So giving of ourselves, caregiving, really does have a physical and emotional toll on each of us. And this stat of 58% of Canadians were feeling role overload was taken 20 years ago. Our stats are not really up to date as far as mental health goes and mental well-being. So hopefully within the next few years we will have some more up-to-date stats. But if 20 years ago 58% of Canadians were feeling role overload, I can just imagine how much that's increased, whether that's caregiving or volunteering, work, family commitments, involvement in the community. And, a lot of those things like family time and volunteering and being involved in our communities have been taken away from us to a degree because of the pandemic. And so some of those community activities or time with family are also some of our wellness strategies that we've not been able to take part in because of COVID-19. So that can feel equally stressful. So there's a lot going on for us. And I think that it's really important for each of us to remember that as I go through this information. We need to give ourselves some compassion, the way that we give it to other people, because we are not just providing support to loved ones or caregiving for people, day to day. We're living through a global trauma and trying to stay healthy and provide that support on an ongoing basis. So we're going to talk today about some of those things that you actually can control, right? We place a lot of stress on ourselves trying to control things that are really out of our control. So this is going to be just taking a look at what choices can you make day to day, being proactive as far as planning ahead and being prepared for things so that you're not worrying too far into the future, and not waiting until you're so completely overwhelmed and exhausted to start taking care of yourself. So 98% of what we're going to talk about today is free. It is not difficult. It's really about ramping up your self-care, increasing your awareness on what's going on in your life, taking a good look at your own personal situation and looking at what you might be able to change, and then deciding where to start. So I want to first start talking about stress, because stress is something that impacts all of us to greater or lesser degrees given the day or what's going on in our lives. So we have some of those external stressors that can impact our day, right? Our physical environment, whether we're feeling stuck in our houses, or maybe we're in a situation where we've got a lot of clutter that we're trying to navigate around, or we've got some chronic pain and it's difficult to go up and down stairs, but moving right now isn't an option. External stress also comes from our social interactions, whether we have too many of them or right now, not enough of them. Maybe there's some organizational things that are going on. If you have a workplace or a community partnership that you're involved in, external stress comes from major life events that might happen to us, and just some of those day-to-day hassles, wearing a white shirt and spilling your coffee on yourself 5 minutes later. But we also have sources of internal stress, right? And those ones are some of the choices that we might make in our life. Negative self-talk, mind traps, getting caught up in our thinking, and thinking then that our thoughts actually define who we are. But they don't, because a lot of what we say to ourselves every day is negative. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that throughout the presentation. Some of your personality traits, right? Whether you're an overachiever or a go-getter and you can't sit and relax until everything's done, so you don't give yourself permission maybe to take some of those breaks that you might need during the day. And then just our internal belief system, the things that are important to us, that we value. And if some of those have got to be compromised, then it can also cause difficulty for us. So there's good stress and there's not so good stress, right? Eustress is the type of good stress, right? And they can be both, in our minds and in our bodies. Good stress kind of motivates us, right? It gives us that short-term kind of energy burst so we can focus, we can get things done. Maybe you've got a task to do, or there's a birthday coming up and you've got to wrap a present, right? That can add a bit of stress to us, but it's kind of a good stress because birthdays are fun generally. That motivates us to maybe get the birthday present and get it wrapped. Something that good stress can feel really exciting. And in those moments, improve our performance and the way that we're responding and reacting. However, distress is the problematic type of stress. And as caregivers, that's a lot of what we might be experiencing, right? That type of stress can feel really heavy, cause us a lot of anxiety or worry. It can be short term where it's just something that we need to deal with in the moment, or it can be long term, as in a caregiving role where you're caring for an ill family member. This stress is perceived by us as being outside of our coping strategies and our ability to handle them. It feels really unpleasant, and it actually decreases our performance. So these are some of the ways that we feel stress in our body. We might feel tired or nauseous, but not be able to sleep, get headaches, feel dizzy, muscle aches. Maybe your heart rate is going up. Emotionally, you may feel angry or anxious or sadness or frustrated, indifferent, hopeless, depressed. Your thoughts, you might have trouble concentrating, not maybe making good choices, worrying too much, maybe forgetting things. I know when I get stressed, I forget things quite a bit. Believing things that might not be true, whether it's about yourself or about the situation. It can cause confusion and make it difficult for us to make decisions. And then in our actions, stress might lead to some nervous types of behaviors, foot tapping or thumb twiddling, smoking, some substance use to maybe mitigate the impact, numb out, can feel restless. Maybe when we're stressed, we're lashing out at the people around us, withdrawing from family, from friends, more so than what the pandemic has caused. Some people who experience a lot of stress will engage in self-harming behaviors as a means of coping, or further isolating themselves, And even prior to the pandemic, many people struggled with isolation and loneliness and feeling disconnected from the community around them, whether it's because of mobility issues or, a lack of people in our lives. But then add the pandemic on top of this, And, we're really not supposed to be going out too far, and we can't gather as friends for parties and have good times. So that also contributes to our stress. Burnout is a little bit different, okay? We often talk about burnout in our work, okay? So with burnout, it's that kind of exhaustion that you feel as a result of the environment that you're in. Frustration with things not improving or not changing. Maybe that's, in your household where you're the only one that's capable of picking up and cleaning up and getting things put away. And maybe you're not feeling well, or you're so overworked in other areas that you don't have time to do that. So that feels stressful and frustrating because you're in an environment that maybe isn't as organized or tidy as what you want it to be. So constantly looking at that and knowing that it's not changing can feel exhausting. And we feel like we can't cope with that kind of thing in our life. Maybe we're feeling powerless to achieve our goals. In a workplace, that can trickle down into a lot of different areas, with having too much work to do and not enough time to do it in, or not being able to move up the corporate ladder because there's no room for advancement. Maybe not having a supportive colleague or supervisor to talk to. And with burnout, it can happen in any type of role or occupation. Generally with burnout, once we leave that role or we leave that workplace, the burnout ends, okay, even if we're still doing the same sort of caregiving or support. So stress and burnout kind of feel the same. They have very similar symptoms. I mentioned that with stress, we kind of sometimes feel hyper or overengaged. So there's this sense of urgency to get things done. We tend to be a bit reactive. Maybe we're lashing out a bit more or overreacting to situations because we are feeling so overwhelmed. We're feeling tired and exhausted with stress, and it leads to us feeling really anxious and has a real physical toll on our body. Stress causes illnesses that we're going to talk about again in a few minutes. When we're burnt out, on the other hand, we tend to feel disengaged. We're flat. Our emotions are blunted. We kind of just don't care. We feel helpless that nothing is going to get better, and we're not really even feeling motivated to try and make a difference because there's no point, right? And that can lead to feelings of depression and have a real emotional toll on us. So those are kind of the difference between stress and burnout. So maybe some of you are identifying with either stress or burnout more than the other one. The next thing I want to talk about is compassion fatigue, because that also is very similar and has similar symptoms and signs to burnout and stress. Okay. When we talk about compassion fatigue, it's really about that caregiving role. Okay. So as family caregivers, you're likely experiencing compassion fatigue. Our nurses are experiencing compassion fatigue, especially through this pandemic. You know, um, Doctors, first responders, fire, police, ambulance, social workers, school teachers, caregivers for family members, PSWs, folks that work in retirement homes or nursing homes, and the folks that maybe are working in those roles outside of the family and are also having those caregiving roles inside the family. Or maybe, your work life is over and you're in those retirement years that you thought you were really going to enjoy, but have been kind of, tightened because of pandemic restrictions, or because you're caring for an ill family member and aren't able to do some of those things that you maybe dreamed about for your own retirement and aging process. So compassion fatigue is kind of the emotional and physical exhaustion that you feel maybe at the end of a workday, maybe in your day-to-day life caring for your loved one. And it results in not being able to feel empathy or sympathy sometimes, right? Often we're caregivers, we feel empathy for other people, right? We put ourselves in their shoes and think about how it must feel for them to have these struggles or this illness. But when we're experiencing that caregiver fatigue, it really puts a strain on our empathy, and we kind of are just going through the motions of our day and our support, our caregiving, in a really disconnected way. You know, Maybe we're not as careful, and we start making some mistakes, and we don't feel that sympathy or empathy that I talked about. And it can lead to depression. It can lead to secondary stress like PTSD, um, depression, anxiety, sometimes addictions, using substances as a means of coping, and also thoughts of suicide. And the worst part about compassion fatigue is that it attacks that part of you that makes you care, right? Your empathy. Compassion fatigue is also what's known as empathic strain, because when we care about people, we empathize, we put ourselves in their shoes, and we are genuinely kind of feeling what that experience must be like, what that illness must be like for them. So when we're that exhausted that we stop feeling, and like I said, we just are going through the motions, that's compassion fatigue. So Dawn mentioned that there's going to be some handouts, and this is going to be one of them. It's your signs and symptoms checklist. And I'm actually going to go through those right now. And maybe you can do a mental check for yourself of what you might be experiencing. And I think what you'll notice is a lot of the signs and symptoms are the same ones that I just mentioned when I was talking about stress. So those signs of compassion fatigue are feeling exhausted, not being able to sleep, getting headaches more often, getting worried about getting sick more often. Some of those physical symptoms that you might have, like headaches, or the exhaustion that you're feeling, or body aches and pains, perhaps then you're worrying that, oh my goodness, is this something more serious? Could I have a stress related illness? Am I developing COVID? Have I been exposed? That kind of thing. Um, Other signs and symptoms are increased use of drugs or alcohol as a means of coping with that stress so that you can kind of numb out, whether it's during your day or at the end of the day, so that you don't have to think about caregiving anymore. And you just want to not think about anything, fall asleep so that you can get up tomorrow and do it all over again. Maybe you're noticing you're feeling more angry or irritable, avoiding people, right? So maybe you know that the person that you're supporting needs you right now, but you're maybe taking a bathroom break and you're sitting in there for 5 or 10 extra minutes just to give yourself some of that time. If it's in a work role, maybe you're calling in sick more often, or you're showing up at work, but you're not really engaged in doing the work. So you're present, but you're not effective. Um, Not being able to make decisions, having problems in your other personal relationships with people. Wanting, if you're in the workforce, it's maybe just wanting to quit and leave that field altogether. You're noticing that there's compromised care for people. Perhaps you're not the only caregiver in your loved one's life, and maybe you're noticing some of these signs or symptoms in any of the other caregivers that are popping in to provide some of that support. Maybe you find that you're distancing yourself or feeling negative about yourself. Like, why don't I care anymore? Why do I feel like I've been, I didn't choose this. Why do I have to deal with this? And, why am I the only one that feels like this? Am I the only caregiver that's experiencing these thoughts or feelings? I can guarantee you you're not. It can lead to, like I said, feeling depressed, not being able to feel sympathy or empathy, feeling cynical, maybe resenting people that aren't in that caregiving role. If you are providing support to more than one person, maybe you're dreading that, feeling helpless, having that disrupted view of the world, like what is going on and is it ever going to get better? It can trickle down into problems with intimacy in your relationships, in your friendships. Intrusive imagery. Maybe you're thinking about something, an illness or something that you just were supporting somebody with, even after it's happened, but you can't get the visual or that thought out of your mind. Maybe you're feeling more anxious or more fearful, having a hard time kind of separating your personal life from your caregiving life or your professional life. Perhaps you sit down to watch TV and you're feeling really super sensitive and emotional to a situation on TV. Maybe you're crying at a situation, a TV show, when that was something that you wouldn't normally do. Maybe you're feeling totally insensitive to emotional material because you just don't feel like you care anymore. And things that might have made you, cry or get teary or caused an emotional reaction just aren't anymore. Perhaps you're feeling more vulnerable and experiencing a bit of a loss of hope. So those are the signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue, and they are very similar to stress. Okay. Like I mentioned, stress can come from a lot of different places in our lives, a lot of external and internal factors. Compassion fatigue comes from being in that caregiving role. So there's two other activities that are included in your handouts that you'll receive tomorrow. And the first one is called What's Draining You? It's also a work-life balance checklist, but in your case, it might just be a life balance checklist, and that work role might just be your caregiving role. So it has a bunch of different areas that you can check off to just see which part of your life is draining your energy, is causing you the most stress. And then at the end, we add them all up, and you can help take a look at maybe where to start in reducing some of those stressors. And I know the first time I did that activity, my score was highest in an area that I didn't even think I was stressed out in. So I had to really think long and hard about why my score was so high. And when I figured it out, it was a 2-minute phone call that I needed to make and had been putting off because I didn't want to. So when I realized that, wow, this is really causing me a lot more stress than I even realized because I forgot about it, I made that phone call and I couldn't believe how much lighter I felt. So sometimes just looking at what your actual stressors are and coming up with a solution for some of them can really help. There's another activity called What's on Your Plate. And in that activity, you just draw a circle and you write down everything that you have to do in a day, you know, and that includes getting your 6 to 8 hours of sleep and maybe getting groceries and doing some house cleaning, or maintaining your own personal hygiene, having a shower, taking the time to splash some cold water on your face and brush your teeth in the morning, um, making meals, doing meal preparation, putting gas in the car, cutting the lawn, whatever those stressors are, those things that you have to do day to day. And then around the outside of that circle that you've drawn, or the outside of your plate, you write down all the things that you used to love to do. Those things that you did before you were so overwhelmed with your role as caregivers. And that might be reading a book. It might be going for a walk. It might be doing a puzzle or playing board games with other family members. It might be soaking in a hot tub with a bath bomb and a nice cold drink beside you and just relaxing for 3/4 of an hour. Whatever that is, whatever those activities or hobbies that you used to enjoy, those tend to be the things that get shoved off our plate when we're feeling exhausted and depleted. So then it's about shuffling the things that are on your plate. Are there responsibilities or things that you can delegate, maybe to other family members? Maybe it's just a matter of, shortening the amount of time you're spending on one specific task by 5 minutes, so that when you do that for 4 or 5 different tasks that you have to do, you now built in 15 or 20 minutes of time for yourself. So it's about making your own well-being a priority as much as you're prioritizing all of the stuff that you feel like you have to get done in a day. And this is where, we start making excuses. I'll slow down when I retire, when I don't have to be in this caregiving role anymore, when the kids move out, when the house sells, when the mortgage is paid off, when I have enough money. I'll slow down when COVID's over. Remember that? Remember 2 months, or when we were 2 months into COVID a year ago? And we were thinking, okay, summer's here. They've got a handle on this. We've just been through our first lockdown. We're going to be back outside again and enjoying our summer activities, maybe, a camping trip or a weekend away. And now here we are 15 months later and we're still in it, right? We don't have the time to put off our well-being, because if we keep putting it off, it's never going to happen. Okay. And then, this compassion fatigue workshop that I do is normally a full day workshop. And this is where we start hearing comments in this full day workshop about, well, you can't possibly know what I go through in a day. I am far too busy to even take 10 minutes for myself to enjoy a cup of tea or a nice cold can of pop. So, the people that are doing that, they just don't know. They just don't get it because they're not nearly as busy as I am, or they're not nearly as stressed as I am, or overwhelmed as I am. And I can tell you that, yes, they probably are. You're not the only one that's feeling this way. those people that are building in time to go for that walk around the block or sit on a park bench and have an ice cream cone are the ones that have made their self-care a priority, perhaps by saying no to other responsibilities, perhaps just by building in that time to make sure that it happens. So the second step in mitigating the impact of compassion fatigue or your ongoing stressors is by enhancing your self-care. And if you're working, or whether that work is just work at home in your caregiving role, it's about finding that balance between your caregiving role and your life. So before we talk about how to manage some of these, I want to talk about what keeps us feeling stressed. Okay. Resisting change. Perhaps there's somebody in your life that has said to you, let me come in for half an hour a day to give you a break. Or let me come in and help with the meal preparation or the housework so that I can take that off your plate for you. But we get so used to doing things the way that we do them that we say no. Or because we're used to being the caregiver, we don't want anybody else in our homes doing some of that because that's my job. I've always done that, right? So we can be resistant to those offerings of help. Sometimes we speak negatively, right? 75% of our self-talk every day is negative. I can't do this. Why me? Why did this happen to me? Why can't I do better? Why can't I catch up? Why don't I care anymore? Why? And we are hard on ourselves. And then we compare ourselves to other people, maybe on social media, maybe in some of those, social forums that we have where we're chatting with other people. We tend to only share our best self with other people, right? We don't let people always know the difficulties that we have. So those mistaken beliefs, thinking that I'm the only one that's struggling because nobody else seems to be feeling this way, and they all probably had time for a shower and they're not wearing yesterday's clothing, and there's no dishes piled in their kitchen sink. Maybe that's just what they're telling you or what they're showing you, right? Because all of us have dishes in our kitchen sink at some point. And, so some of those mistaken beliefs or thought distortions that we have can really keep us stressed. Sometimes as caregivers, we feel like we can't talk about what we're going through. So that lack of sharing our feelings or not being direct or assertive and telling people what we need can keep us stressed. Leading that high stress lifestyle with all kinds of different stressors coming in or excessive busyness. Not having a meaning or a sense of purpose for your own individual life. If your sole purpose is caregiving, that's keeping you stressed because you're losing yourself and who you are. And you don't have to. There's lots of community supports that are available to help provide care when you're feeling exhausted, or better yet, even before you're feeling exhausted, so that you can maintain your own wellness. Use of stimulants like drinking 15 coffees a day to stay awake and keep your energy up, or, that's not healthy. Using drugs or alcohol to numb out at the end of the day or help you fall asleep quicker is also not healthy or helpful. And not asking for help, right? Asking for help is one of the best coping strategies we have. But often as caregivers, we don't do it because we're the ones that help other people. So not seeking help might be the thing that's keeping you stressed. Whoops, I don't know why that happened. There we go. So the basics of self-care, okay, getting enough sleep, taking your breaks during the day and actually using those breaks to rest. So if you make yourself a cup of tea or you pour yourself a nice cold glass of water and you want to just sit down for 5 minutes and drink that, then make sure that that's what you're doing, right? Rest is supposed to be restorative. So if you're sitting down with your tea or your cold drink and the sole purpose of taking a break and you're planning what you're going to do next after your break is over, that's not resting, okay? That's multitasking. When we're resting, when you get that 5 minutes to take a break, make sure you're fully taking it. Make sure that you're eating healthy, having time for physical activity. Maybe it's taking a walk around the block. We can't go on vacations, but we may be able to create a staycation situation, right? Where We maybe invest a little bit more in our backyard and plant some extra flowers so that it's and put a nice chair out there so that when we can take a break and get outside and just enjoy some of the sunshine, we have a nice yard to look at or a nice balcony, that's decorated with flowers and things that make us happy. Self-care is about activities that renew you and replenish you every single day. And it's also about talking about some of those difficulties or those stressful situations in your caregiving role with the other people in your life, or maybe with a social worker or another support system. Again, those negative coping mechanisms, using drugs and alcohol, isolating yourself further, right? COVID has isolated us. In a caregiving role that's taking up a good portion of your time, that is very isolating for caregivers because there's not the time to go out maybe that there used to be because maybe you're afraid of leaving your loved one alone for any period of time. COVID-19 has caused us to further isolate, right? So not reaching out and making phone calls or having Zoom chats with family members or Zoom dinners where you're eating your meal and you've got a family member or a friend sitting on the other side of their laptop eating their meal with you. So you have that conversation. So further isolating yourself because you're exhausted and maybe don't want to talk to people is also not a good coping strategy because we are social beings and we need people, right? We're not meant to be alone all the time. Taking risks. Maybe you're gambling online or driving too fast, or engaging in other risky behaviors to feel that rush of just being alive again. That's not healthy if you're doing too much of that. Lashing out, taking out anger and frustration on the mailman or your pet or the first person that calls to check in and see how you're doing. That's not a healthy coping strategy. We need to use other ways to get out some of that negative energy. And the best way to do that is doing something physically active. Maybe it's stretching. Maybe it's taking a quick walk to the corner and back. Poor eating habits, right? It's hard to cook and be a caregiver. So then maybe we get used to drive-through meals or foods that are easy to pop in the microwave and heat up, or, prepackaged meals where there's a lot of, it's easy. There's food in there, it fills us up, but maybe we're not getting the nutrition that we need. Self-harming behaviors are another way that people sometimes cope negatively as a means of grounding themselves, of, feeling physically the emotional pain that they're experiencing. But these negative coping strategies cause us to further disconnect from our lives. People engage in them because they work for them to some degree, right? They're easier than doing the healthy things, doing the things that keep us well. These are our more passive ways that we can cope, but they're not good coping strategies. So I understand that in caregiving roles, especially when you're caring for a loved one in your home, there's not a whole lot of time for your own self-care or your own, taking a break and not having to worry. So it's about creating those moments and building them maybe into your caregiving role. Maybe it is doing something creative, getting a paintbrush and some canvas from the dollar store with some paints and doing something creative with your loved one, you know. Maybe it's just putting on some of your favorite songs. Maybe you've got some old records or CDs, or a playlist on your phone if you've downloaded music that you haven't listened to in a while. There's a radio station on TV. They've got all kinds of oldies on your TV channels listings, or on YouTube. Put on some of your favorite music and play that through the day. Because even if you have that music in the background, you can sing to it while you're engaging in your caregiving, and music lifts us, right? Maybe it's making time to plan out your day, prioritizing what you want to do, journaling, picking some flowers from your new garden, or buying some flowers the next time you go get groceries and putting them around the house so you can enjoy those. Our self-care needs to be holistic. We need to engage in physical health self-care, self-care for our minds, for our emotions, our spirituality, our personal care, and professionally if you're still in the workforce. And I don't have a lot of time to kind of go into each of these individually, but I do want you to know again that you will be getting a copy of these slides in an email tomorrow, so you can take a closer look at these, and they give you some really great strategies on how to care for yourselves. There's also this slide with 50 great ways to take a short break. Okay, so if you can't think of a way to take a break, there's 50 of them right in front of you. Okay. Also, for coping, we need to plan for challenges. You need to know what causes you stress. And that was one of those handouts that I talked about. Know what your warning signs are. Where do you feel stress in your body? Do you get headaches? Do you feel exhausted? Do you not sleep well? Do you have gut issues? Figure out what those are for yourself so that when you start to experience them, you can really ramp up that self-care ahead of time before it manifests itself into a full-blown stress reaction or illness. Make a short list of things you can do when you're stressed. Call in your support people and let other people know how they can help you and what you find unhelpful. Sometimes people have really great intentions, but they end up causing us more work. So it's about being honest about what's unhelpful. It's also about investing in yourself, having conversations and interactions with people that lift your spirit, being near positive people, right? People that aren't always complaining or draining your energy, finding hobbies and activities to do that you love. Talk to yourself positively. Those negative thoughts and things that we say to ourselves, turn that around and say to yourself, I am doing the best that I can. I am enough. I am a rock star. I am really doing well. This is difficult, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm doing the best that I can. And maintain that sense of humor, try to look for the humor even in the worst situations. Make time in the evenings if you're watching television to put on funny shows. Try not to watch shows about, trauma life in the ER and, Chicago Fire and Station 19 and Grey's Anatomy and The Good Doctor and, all of those shows about trauma and illness, right? And watch TV shows that are the opposite of that because you've already got enough of that going on in your caregiving role. And remembering that taking care of yourself doesn't mean me first, it means me too. And we need to all be able to do that. So the next activity is a self-care inventory. And there's 2 pages of things you can do for your self-care. So mark off some of the things that you're already doing and maybe highlight or put a circle around some of those things that maybe you used to love to do or new things that you can try for your self-care. The next step in mitigating the impact of compassion fatigue is building your resilience, your bounce back factor through stress reduction. Okay. And maybe that's laying in bed at night and putting something on your laptop or on a tablet or your cell phone on YouTube about maybe it's guided imagery where you can listen to somebody walk you down a garden path and help you fall into a peaceful sleep. Or, maybe that's you're on a beach and listening to sound of the ocean waves. Maybe it's about, just listening to something calming as you fall asleep. So there's lots of those on YouTube. Or you can probably even still go buy CDs and stuff like that at Chapters Indigo. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If you are feeling empty and depleted, that means you have nothing left to give, and it's time to refill yourself and make you a priority. So I mentioned that resiliency, our bounce back factor. And those are the skills and the tools that we've learned throughout our lives to keep going when life has knocked us down. Those coping skills, those strengths that we have. And perhaps you've forgotten about some of those. So try to think back into different times in your life when you had difficulty. What did you do to get through them? What was your key support? What did you do for yourself then? And use some of those skills and strategies now. So one of the other handouts is a resiliency quiz, and it helps you take a look at, am I resilient enough? The key factor in building resilience is our relationships. Have you shut down? Have you cut off relationships? I know myself, I'm guilty of it. Two of my friends actually called me yesterday, and I hadn't talked to them in months. And I thought, well, thank goodness they reached out, because I know I haven't really felt like it. It's hard to reach out and keep talking to people on the phone when you really just want to see them and go out for lunch or have a coffee or have them over to your home, right? So those relationships are what help keep us well. So reach out to people, make those phone calls, even if you haven't talked to people in 2 months or 4 months or a year. Write them a letter, you know. Practicing mindfulness throughout your day is also really important. Little kids are great at being mindful. They're totally focused on what they're doing in the moment right now all the time. They don't have the mind clutter that we do as adults, all those things that we have to get done, make the lunch and do the dishes and do the laundry and sweep the floor and pay the bills and blah, 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 right? We've got so much on our mind. We need to try and be more like kids that way and just be in the moment that we're in. Because mindfulness, when we practice that, it helps us from getting too far lost in the past. Or, if you're still angry or upset about how somebody wronged you 5 years ago and you're holding on to that, then you're not able to fully enjoy what's happening in your life right now. You're going to miss those good moments. Or if you're worried about what might happen next week or in 2 weeks, or if you're still going to be in this caregiving role 5 years from now, and what's that going to look like, then you cannot be where you are right now. All we have is right now. So try practicing bringing your full attention to right now. Practice it when you're doing the dishes, feeling the warm water on your hands, the soap bubbles in the water and how that feels on your skin. The piece of spaghetti that's floating around in the bottom of the sink. Yeah, we can try and not focus too much on that because that's gross, but you know what I mean? Just bring your attention to what you're doing without thinking about other things. Because when we do that, we're able to recognize that even the worst moments are just a moment, and we will get through that moment, right? So practicing mindfulness is so helpful. It also reduces our blood pressure. It reduces inflammation that's associated with cancer and diabetes and arthritis, Alzheimer's, autoimmune conditions. It helps us be more present in our lives and enjoy our life. It helps us regulate our emotion, and it helps reduce some of those negative emotions that we have. It, re- it builds our relationships. It increases intimacy with our friends, with our partners. It's a great self-care tool. It's good for our own immune system. And it helps us not get caught up in thoughts about the past that can lead, or too far into the future, that can lead to anxiety and depression. Another strategy that you can use every single day, even if you're caregiving 24 hours a day, is practicing gratitude. In the worst moments, on the worst days, there are still things to be grateful for. Look out your window right now. The sun is shining. It's warm. There's birds flying around. There's not a cloud in the sky, I don't think. Not where I'm sitting anyway. Be grateful for that sunbeam. Remember the dark, cold winter we had, right? Be grateful for the cup of coffee sitting in front of you, for the phone call that you got from a friend, for the 5-minute nap you managed to get in, or the 5 minutes of peace and quiet that you had just to enjoy a cup of coffee. When we say out loud what we are grateful for, it changes our brain. It's really good for us. Every time we practice gratitude, a shot of dopamine gets released in our brain. And dopamine is our body's feel-good chemical. It when we are laughing really, really hard, or when we're happy, or when something really great is happening, dopamine gets fired in our brain and it feels good. Every time we practice gratitude and we say out loud what we're grateful for, I'm grateful for the sunshine. I'm grateful for this cup of coffee in front of me. I'm grateful for this opportunity for training. I'm grateful that I have a loved one that I can care for and that I'm not alone. Every time we practice that, dopamine gets released in our brain and it feels good. And because it feels good, our brain wants to notice more things that we're grateful for. So the more we practice gratitude, the more we notice things in our life that are good, and then we feel happier just automatically. And we don't have to take a break. We don't have to be alone for 5 minutes to do this. We can do this in every moment. Write on a Post-it note something that you're grateful for at every meal. If you have partners or people that you live with, get them to do it. Nobody's coming to visit anyways. Stick those Post-it notes on your dining room wall. You pretty soon are going to have a whole set of wallpaper with all the things that everybody in your life is grateful for. And you can look at those when you feel down, right? When we practice gratitude, we want to be more active. We sleep better. I watched a podcast by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he talked about how the last 5 minutes of our day in bed, when we're just before we're falling asleep, is usually spent thinking about everything that went wrong during our day, all the negative stuff. He said, and when we think about all the negative stuff just before we fall asleep, we're programming our subconscious mind to wake up grumpy. We're programming ourselves to not have a restful sleep. But if we can change that, he said, if we can change that and lay in bed and think about what was good in our day, we get a better night's sleep. It programs our subconscious mind to be happy so that when we wake up, we feel better. Gratitude decreases anxiety and depression. It helps us feel more connected to other people, but also to ourselves and our lives. And it reminds us what we enjoy and what we have in our life rather than what we don't, right? It reminds us to be grateful for the things that the people in our lives do for us instead of what they don't do for us and what we think we might deserve. Practice gratitude for the fact that you have a roof over your head and food in your cupboards, right? Start a gratitude journal. If you don't like the Post-it note idea, get a little notebook. Write down every day what you're grateful for. Tell the people in your life what you're grateful for about them. The last way to mitigate the stress and this compassion fatigue is making a commitment to yourself to do one thing differently, one thing that will help improve your life and your mood and your happiness. That might be practicing gratitude and committing to saying 5 things a day that you're grateful for. It might just mean saying one thing a day. When I first started practicing gratitude, I was really sick and I was off work for 6 months. And I had a lot of physical pain. This is a true story. And I had a lot of doctor's appointments. I slept on my couch for 4 months because I couldn't climb the stairs. And I started getting really low in my mood. I thought, Laura, you're getting depressed. You need to do something about this. And then that other side of my brain was, yeah, good idea. I can't get off the couch. I can't move. What am I going to do? Right. So I was reminded about gratitude. And first thing in the morning, when I woke up, I thought of something I was grateful for. Some days it was that I had a roof over my head. Some days it was that I could see that little ray of sun shining in between the crack in the curtains. Some days I was grateful that I woke up again. And then the last thing before I went to sleep at night, I thought of one thing that I was grateful for. A hug from my daughter, a phone call from a friend. The fact that I was well enough to stand up and walk outside and sit on the deck for half an hour in the sunshine. And within 2 weeks, my mood lifted. I was happier. Still didn't know what was going on physically, but I was happier. It takes 21 days to form a habit. So if you practice gratitude for 2 days and it doesn't work, it's because you're not doing it long enough. Okay. 21 days to form a habit or break a habit. So is there one small thing that you can do differently? One small thing that you can commit to? And then do it. Not doing anything different, choosing to do nothing is a choice, right? You might say, I don't have a choice. Doing nothing is a choice. You always have a choice, okay? So it's about making a choice to do one thing. If you're really interested in compassion fatigue, this is the website. I was trained in compassion fatigue about 10 years ago by a woman named Françoise Mathieu. And this is her website. So you can take a look there for more information. And again, all of these will come to you in an email tomorrow. Bounce Back is another resource for helping to manage mild to moderate depression, low mood. There's videos that you can watch. There's also workbooks and telephone coaching if you're interested in that. You can visit us online at the Canadian Mental Health Association. We have a site called Here for Help in response to COVID-19, and it's got resources for supporting people from the age of 1 to 101. It also lists all of our upcoming free webinars that we do every week. You can call our local crisis service here 24/7 if you're worried about or you yourself are having a mental health crisis, okay? Any time of the day or night, someone's there to answer the phone. But it is also the intake and referral point for the mental health and addiction supports throughout Waterloo, Wellington. I've listed a bunch of other resources and apps that you can download on your cell phones or on your tablets. There's a brand new website called Wellness Together Canada. Down at the bottom there is an initiative of the Canadian government in response to COVID-19. It's just come out in the last 2 months. So that's something else that we can take a look at. And I'm just going to bring myself back on screen to take a look to see if there's been any questions or if there are any current questions from any of you folks that I can answer. So thanks very much for joining us, and yeah, hope to hear some questions or some comments from you. I think you're on mute, Don.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise and your positive messaging and your tools and recommendations and strategies with us all. I know that people have been paying a great deal of attention to what you've been saying. In terms of questions, we really haven't had many questions, and that's likely a factor of how close people were listening. But we have had someone share a sentiment that I'm sure many people are feeling, and it's that notion of someone else has to be with our family members so we can take a long bath or a walk, and there isn't anyone else. So I'd like to respond to that quickly, if I may, before we turn it over to Laura to have a final comment. If you do find yourself in that position, and I'm sure many of you do, and often may not know where to look or have not had luck in acquiring help and support and assistance, you'll find my email address in the email that comes out to you post-session. And I'd invite you to contact me directly, and I can see if I might be able to be helpful with that. There are other resources. The Ontario Caregiver Organization you'll be familiar with. There's an excellent new toolkit that's been developed by Your Care Plus. So www.yourcareplus.ca. We'll include all of those with you. But Laura, you talked about making these moments matter, right? These few moments people have, making them matter, and making right now matter. So I'll leave the final comment to you before I thank everyone again.
Okay, I'm seeing a few things in the Q&A, so I'm going to take a quick look. Thank you for sharing strategies. Thank you. All of the lists feel overwhelming. Yes, they do. And again, those lists and those comments weren't meant to further stress you out, right? That's not the intention. It's about when you feel that you do have a moment to make this personal for yourselves, to kind of figure out where you're at, and you know, make the choice to do one small thing. To just improve the quality of the life that you have, and that remembering that it's okay to ask for help. Yeah, just reach out. Don's got some other great resources that he's going to be sending out. People can only help us if we ask them. So sometimes as caregivers, that's really difficult to do.
Thanks so much, Laura. Once again, on behalf of all of us here today, thank you very much. If you can advance the slide. Finally, we'd like to thank you for joining us. Oh,
I thought it was there. Did I not put it in?
So thank you all for joining us. We'll have we have 2 more sessions coming up. One is next Wednesday, and it will be looking at healthy aging, ways to continue to look after ourselves through healthy activities, healthy eating, and getting a good night's sleep. We'll have experts joining us then, followed by a presentation the following week on supporting older adults at risk. So promoting safety, protecting people who might be at risk from abuse or neglect. And we'll include those links in the post-session email as well. So thank you again to you. Thank you to Laura for joining us today and sharing with us all that she has. And thank you to my colleague, Giselle Loyola, for assisting us with the technical and follow-up activities that, that will follow. So thank you very much again, and please enjoy your day. I hope to see you again. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.